Good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending on where you're logging in from. This is Jason with Partner First. I want to welcome you to our first webinar of 2012. And today we're going to be talking about overcoming short sale obstacles. And on the line with us today, we have our Director of Education, Jacob Swodeck. And this is a brand new presentation. So here at Partner First, we certainly try to stay ahead of the curve and on the cutting edge of what's new, what's exciting, and what's not so exciting in short sales, and most importantly, how you can work your way through the transitional periods and stay up to date. So this new presentation on overcoming short sale obstacles really is a good presentation. I've gone through the slide deck. There's some great nuggets of information in here. You want to make sure you have a writing utensil and a pad handy so that you can jot down some notes. For those premium members on the line, if you miss any portion of it or if things happen to go too fast, don't worry. This will be posted to the members area at the end of the day in its entirety with the audio as well as the slide deck so that you can download that and potentially use that for some internal office training. Prior to getting started, I want to do a quick audio sound check. So on the right-hand side of the toolbar, you'll see a question tool pane. Just go ahead and hit the plus button right next to where it says questions and open that up. And then just type in, yes, I can hear you, sounds good, loud and clear, just so I know that we have good audio. And as I'm waiting for a few responses to come in, we'll check Jacob's audio as well. So good morning, Jacob. How are you this morning?
I'm good, Jason. Thanks for asking. So yeah, let us know how we sound so we can jump right into it. We had a little technical difficulty, but I want to jump right into the content as quick as possible here.
All right, so let me just get a few responses from the agents on the line. That'd be very much appreciated, and I am getting a few. Sounds good, loud and clear, sounds good. All right, well, with that said, Jacob, I'm just going to move the question bar over here for a second, and then I'll give you over the controls. I want to be able to see the questions that come in, and just let you guys know at any point during the presentation, if you have a question, just go ahead and type it into the same box that you did the audio check on. And we will have a Q&A session towards the end of the call. So with that said, Jacob, the floor is all yours.
Sounds good. Very good. Thanks a lot, Jason. Yeah, let's jump right into it today. You know, every now and then we try to be a little more interactive. You know, there's a strong demand from our members to just give unique trainings that are based on higher level procedures and stuff like that. But every now and then I really like to just dig into our members forum and kind of see what trends are emerging, as well as many of you know that I'm an active agent who carries a pretty sizely amount of listings and also run a third-party negotiating company out of California where we help agents do short sales. So I feel like I have my finger on the pulse in many different senses in terms of being able to know what the challenges are out there. By no stretch are we trying to cover all the obstacles today, and I don't think that would be efficient. But I did want to at least address some of the major ones, or maybe not even major, just the ones that have been coming up more recently, and maybe something will stick. Maybe it's a challenge you've had as well, and hopefully you get some value out of this. So I'm going to jump right to the first slide here. Our 3 obstacles of focus in today's training. We're going to look at a few of the recent obstacles, as we said, that our members have been discussing in the forum, as well as those that I've been experiencing. Number 1, judgment liens that affect title. This is nothing new, but it doesn't change the fact that it's an obstacle, and sometimes it can derail a transaction. We're going to talk about that first. Then we're going to go into when the servicer or investor won't allow buyer's closing cost credit, and the buyer really needs it. You know, they've been waiting all this time. You get to the 1-yard line after 75 days of waiting in the queue. The buyer gets the approval sent back from the listing agent, and they don't allow closing costs, and that buyer needed them. And that's a big problem in our business. So we're going to talk about that. And then finally, when the servicer or investor would prefer to foreclose rather than short selling. You know, there's a lot of conspiracy theory out there that even though we know that financially the banks and the investors on these loans would prefer to short sell over foreclosure. When you look at the numbers, short sale is always better, blah, blah, blah. But that's not always the case. And I'm going to give you a couple instances today that if you're savvy enough, you'll pick up on the nuances and you'll be able to detect in your own inventory and your own listings when a servicer slash investor might prefer to foreclose. And if you can detect that up front, it might help you stay away from some of the more troubled files. So let's jump right into judgments. Judgment liens that affect title. Most short sale training covers the art of dealing with second and maybe even third mortgages, right? We talk a lot about that. Many other trainings or platforms, blogs, live events that happen in real estate offices across the U.S. Whoever it is, they talk a lot about dealing with juniors, dealing with seconds and thirds, HAFA, and all the different challenges and game plan strategies in that space. But there's very little that actually talks about judgment liens, dealing with these non-mortgage liens, and in some sense you're kind of on your own because there's so many different details and particulars for each different situation depending on how that lien landed in the hands of whoever is handling it and those types of things. So we're going to talk about that when you get to this place where you detect there's a judgment that liens the property, it affects your clear title, it has to be negotiated before you can close the transaction. What are some of the things you can do to handle that situation, A, and then B, how can you try to detect it as early as possible so it doesn't become one of those issues that the whole deal is hanging on at the end of the process. So first bullet point, judgments may be pre-existent or they can pop up mid-transaction. It's not like a mortgage lien that's just there, it's been there for 6 years and everybody knows about it. Judgments they're an active process. People can be being sued or sent to court or have active judgments being pursued while they're doing a short sale. Kind of this dual tracking concept is there can be that happening at the same time. I know many of you know that, but I'm trying to paint the picture that just because the borrower A says that there's no judgment / lien, or B, you don't find it in your early research, doesn't mean it won't be there towards the end. I don't think we need to create a big aura of skepticism where we're constantly running preliminary title reports every 10 days. But definitely I'm going to give you some what I feel is valuable practical information. So just know it can happen mid-transaction or it can be pre-existent. Here's something that you don't hear me say very often. Always, always means always get a full preliminary title report as soon as you ink the listing. And, I will tell you that I have a close relationship with Fidelity National Title, and I know that there are other title companies out there that don't like to give preliminary title reports until such a time that that you're actually in contract, in an actual escrow, and depending on where you're at in the country, whether it's an escrow officer, a settlement agent, or an attorney, they don't like to do it because it's an investment. It costs up to $150. Sometimes, I think one I had was $160 the title company told me to order this title report, this preliminary report. So you have to build a rapport and a relationship with a title professional and say, hey, I want to close more deals. Work out your relationship details, but make sure that you're able to order prelims, not just property profiles that show mortgage liens. I'm talking about a preliminary title report, a legal, scientific report where they dig in and actually find out if there's any liens or judgments, and they are on the hook for that report, what they find. That's why they issue title insurance, because they're insuring later on that, hey, yeah, we checked and there's nothing else encumbering the property. So get your prelim early as soon as you get the listing. The next bullet point is to interview your seller client to determine if a judgment's on its way. And some people say buyers are liars and they're real negative about their clients. But if you ask the right questions, it's not that hard to figure out. Listen, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, it's very important that I know, and this should be part of your questionnaire when you're meeting with them. Are there any liens or judgments that affect title? The answer is no. Have you been getting any certified letters? Are there any credit card companies threatening to file lien or any other kind of financial obligation? It's very important because this can derail the transaction. Obviously, this is a time where you can start talking about HOA as well, because HOA liens are a whole other bear that we're not going to touch in this particular webinar. But interview them, and they will usually know, since it's a legal procedure and the demand for the collector to inform the debtor is a strict process in most states. The demand of proof of notification is huge. They have to go through so many hoops when a lien is filed that it'd be a very rare circumstance for the borrower / homeowner to not know about this in advance. Let's move forward. So here's some things to think about. And some of this is a little bit advanced, and I know I move quick sometimes, and you can ask questions afterwards. But there's some things that when I'm training our negotiators how to think, how to act, what to do in these situations, these are the things we talk about. Who are you dealing with? When you're dealing with a judgment, so let's look at a real practical thing. So you order a preliminary title report, you find out, wow, there's a judgment from Citibank, and it's being handled by the law offices of Wolf and Pearson. And so you you call title, you order that lien, they send it to you, it's got a phone number, you call that number, say I'm, Jacob Swodeck, authorized third party, let me send you my third party authorization. I'm working on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Jones, doing a short sale for them, and I see this lien popped up. It's an upside down negative equity transaction. The borrower has suffered major hardship, and we want to see we want to start to dialogue about you guys releasing your lien in order to help the borrowers avoid foreclosure. So you start that. Right away you got to figure out, is it an attorney, collection company, is it an internal branch of a larger financial institution, was it subbed out, outsourced? Who are you dealing with? A lot of times it'll say law office because the law office filed the judgment or lien, but you're not necessarily dealing with attorneys, you're dealing with collection companies. And that does make a difference, because when an attorney is actually dealing with the situation, they're being paid traditionally a premium, and that's going to increase the amount that their minimum that they'll accept when it comes to releasing this lien. Whether if it's a collection company, maybe they're just working as a third party collecting on the behalf of somebody else, or maybe it was bad debt that they purchased. Maybe the lien is a little older, the judgment is, and maybe they bought it for 15 cents on the dollar, and they are just trying to go through that debt and trying to get as much as they can. Worst case scenario, at least recoup what they invested in on that purchase of that lien. You got to find out who you're dealing with. Next one is know their priority and protocol. How does this work? I'm sure you guys have had plenty of short sale negotiation situations. My client has no money. I can send you a bank statement to prove that. There's a first and a second mortgage. The first is obviously takes priority. They're going to give some chump change to the junior lien, and that leaves very, very little to nothing for you guys. I'm not trying to play hardball. I just want to know, where do we start here? You want me to try to scrounge up $500? Is everybody happy? What does this look like? And you start that dialogue and find out from them what's their protocol, what's their priority, what are they trying to do? Are they just trying to break even? Are they trying to get a big amount? Sometimes they'll come right back and say, we want 50%. 50 cents on the dollar. It's an $11,000 judgment. We want $5,500 or else don't call us back. So I'm not trying to candy kill this. Believe me, I've had some tough situations. But it's important as you go through this process to find out what is their priority and what's their protocol as a collector or an attorney. Can you find out their financial threshold? If you were in a live class, I'd tell you to put next to this that this is for experts. This is not a novice thing. There are some people on this call today who are phenomenal negotiators, but I recognize your name when you jumped on. And here's the deal. It takes a special gift to do this. I don't like to make it sound easier than it is, but I've done it and my colleagues have done it. There are ways to pounce on weakness, to build relationship, and to find out what is their threshold. Hey, you know what, Teresa, or whatever the negotiator or collector name is, Teresa, look, I've worked so hard on this transaction for a long time. I can show you the MLS historical report. And to have it derailed because you guys are pounding, your check because you want full dollars, it just doesn't make sense. What I need to know is this a pool of debt, bad debt that you guys bought on the secondary market? If so, tell me what your threshold is. Let me work with you. Help me help you. I'm pretty good at this. I've done this for X amount of years. Let me go on a fundraising campaign and find out if I can meet that minimum net. This is not a strategic defaulter. This guy and his wife are really, really struggling. Give them a little insight about their hardship. And my job is to come in and make everybody happy and make this thing work. And you start building rapport, build relationship. I'm here to help you. I'm here to make it happen. My job is to mend all these loose ends and make it work and build that. And if you can find out what their financial threshold is, meaning we bought it for 20 cents on the dollar, we won't take less than 25, let me go to work. Well, you take 10% and the other 15% the promissory note or whatever it is, and you start getting down to the nitty-gritty of it. Here's the question: does the debt survive foreclosure in your state? There are states that after foreclosure, that debt will not survive anymore, meaning that judgment is debunked. It no longer has any power or the ability to collect from that person. But in most states, that judgment or lien just turns into a personal judgment against their social, and it doesn't lien any property if they don't have any other property. And in those cases, the collector/attorney is not extremely motivated to take pennies on the dollar just to help the borrower avoid foreclosure, because they're not in this business to make friends. They're in this business to make as much money as they can. So the threat of foreclosure doesn't always work. So research the laws in your state to find out if that is a threat or not, or if that is some leverage, a leverage point you can use when dealing with the collection company. Is your seller client willing to contribute financially? Look, I've done this so many times. You guys know, those of you who follow us, I've closed about 1,100 short sales. That means I've been in 1,100, maybe more like 1,500 listing appointments in my career since 1998. I know people don't want to spend money. I know people act broke. I know people don't want to commit to writing a check. But it's all in your approach. If the judgment comes up, you create some urgency. This is bad. This could potentially lead to foreclosure because these lien holders, these judgment holders are very strict and very pushy, and they want dollars. I know that your hope, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, my clients, is to not spend any money. But if you can go on a fundraising campaign, sell some things on Craigslist or eBay, borrow from family just to come up with a little bit, not only is that going to help us deal with this judgment/lien, it's going to help you avoid being $300,000 upside down in your house, avoiding foreclosure, potential tax implications, all that. So see the bigger picture. It's not just about, I don't want to pay these dumb creditors. They're difficult and they've been, really rude and abrasive to my wife. All that doesn't matter. What they have to see is sometimes the investment to make the judgment go away is more about the big picture, the freedom that they'll have after the short sale is complete. So you got to find that out sometimes, and I'll tell you what, it takes sometimes an expert approach to be a good listener, to be a counselor, to walk your homeowner through the process, listen, identify their challenges, and say, I'm going to talk to you like I would talk to a relative. I know it's not a popular thing to say, but you're going to have to come up with some money here. And let's look at life after foreclosure and life after short sale if it's not possible. But you told me I wouldn't have to spend money. I never said that. I said that you don't have to pay commission. I didn't know this judgment was here. It just popped up, and it will derail the whole thing. I'm reporting to you exactly what my conversation with the collection company has been. So let's put our guard down and let's talk real. And that's when you have that conversation. Will the lien holder, collector, attorney accept a promissory note? Some states don't allow promissory notes. California is one of them. SB 458 is not going to let someone have a surviving note after a short sale. SB 458 would actually encourage in California a lien holder or judgment holder to foreclose, because then they still have the ability to collect, whereas after a short sale they wouldn't. And then finally, is the listing even worth taking? The more research you do up front, and I don't think we should be overly cherry pickers unless your inventory is so great. There's a saying, with quantity comes quality. You can't cherry pick if you only have 2 listings. You need to feed your family. But if you have 200 listings, then you can cherry pick a little bit. But I want to be real and know that there's people on this call that don't have the ability to cherry pick. But the more research you can do up front, the more you'll be able to tell yourself. If you have a client who goes, I will never, ever, ever spend money on this lien. I don't care if it goes to foreclosure. I've had foreclosure before. We're getting a divorce. This whole thing is her idea. I don't even care. Trust me, you'll never get a penny out of me, Mr. Realtor. And you got a $40,000 judgment and a first and a second with B of A first and Chase second. Why would you even take the listing unless you're just a masochistic real estate professional? So sometimes you got to know when to walk away from a deal. So judgment liens, a little depressing, right? Not perfect, but this is you putting on your big boy or big girl shorts and knowing that I got to negotiate. I'm going to have to roll up my sleeves and figure out how to be a matchmaker, how to make all parties satisfied through my ability and skills. I've had a conversation or a debate with some of my colleagues in this business who do large volume, and we all kind of agree that not everybody who can put a sign in the yard and do and sign contracts and fill out offers and disclosures is equipped to do short sales. There is a special gene, a special gift, if you will, that it takes to negotiate properly with these other parties. And if you don't got it, find someone who does, because it is a gift. It's something that does not come easy. It can be learned, I think, over the years with a desire to learn, but I can just tell you, some personality types, they turn on the jets, they act a certain way, and it shuts the whole deal down. You got to learn how to be a chameleon, work together, work as a team, find out how to make this thing work. So that's the first bullet point, judgment liens that affect title. Excuse me, let's look at the next one. When the servicer or investor won't allow a buyer's closing cost credit, and the buyer really needs it, what do you do in a situation where you're the listing agent, but maybe you're the buyer's agent, maybe you're the selling agent, but you have an offer, and you put all your eggs in one basket. This is the offer you cater to. You put a ring on their finger. You're walking down the aisle. You put all the closing costs on the HUD-1. The bank comes back and says, it's approved. You're like, yes. You know, you're calling everybody up prematurely. You haven't even seen the approval letter yet and find out that they have not allowed any of the closing costs. And that buyer really, really needed them. And it's just a real womp, 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 right? What do we do now? Look at some of these points. Some servicer investors will never allow buyer's closing cost credit, or there might be a 1% cap or a cap on total selling costs. Auckland is one of the perfect examples. They don't come out and say no closing costs, but they will absolutely tell you that in most cases, because obviously there's always a smarty pants on the phone who says, well, I had one situation, but 99.9% of the time, Auckland is going to tell you got 8% total for all selling costs, including closing costs, and any other kind of fees that are on the seller side. So how are you going to pay 6% commission, escrow title, legal fees, whatever fees you have in your state, plus 3% closing costs? It just does not map out. So that's one thing, and we'll get back to this, but I'm just hitting some bullet points here. So some will never do it. Some have 1% caps. Others have more of a total net percentage, like Auckland, where you have to try to squeeze some closing costs in there. By the way, a big thing you need to do is to learn how to interview that selling agent, if you're the listing agent, and find out for real how bad this buyer needs these costs. And I have a real frank conversation with him. I say, you know, Leslie, your offer looks good. Thanks so much. It's conventional. They're asking for costs. They're putting 10% down, but they still need closing costs, and they're going to have MI. Is this closing cost kind of your bargaining chip? Hey, if we get it, we get it. If not, no big deal. And I'm not trying to get you to not act in your client's best interest. I'm trying to avoid a pitfall down the road. I guarantee I will push as hard as I can to get those costs. But I need to know if it's a deal breaker, I may need to continue to accept other offers because this particular lender trends toward not paying closing costs. Sit right in their lap. Have that conversation. There's no shortcuts here. You know, you're acting in your client's best interest and your own family and your own personal best interest. We don't have time to wait 4, 5, 6 months to find out that without cost the deal doesn't work and now you're back hunting for a new offer. Have that conversation up front. Next bullet point. Some servicers or investors will only allow buyers' closing costs for FHA or VA financing. For example, even FHA, HUD pre-foreclosure sales, they'll allow it for FHA or HUD, or VA financing, I should say. Some others, many of the larger institutions, they don't like to pay closing costs for conventional. They just take it right out. They just take their red pen out and cross it right off the HUD. Not going to happen. And we'll talk about why in a moment. But just so you know, there are many, the larger institutions that will pay FHA or VA or closing costs if the buyer's going FHA or VA. And then the final bullet point on this page, sometimes it's more about the net to the investor than the buyer's closing costs. The buyer's closing costs are just the easiest thing to cut out sometimes. This is a whole other giant to tackle, but a lot of times when the negotiator or the servicer/investor starts red penning stuff on your HUD-1, it's because they're trying to whittle it down to get to that net that they need to give to their investor, right? So the investor, let's call it Fannie Mae or Deutsche Bank or ABC, whoever it is, they might say, hey, whatever fair market value is, you got to net me 87%. Well, that sounds all fine and good unless there's $15,000 in delinquent property taxes, big HOA problems, blah, blah, blah. It's HAPA, so they got to give $6,000 up to the second, and they got to pay 6% commission. And this stuff adds up, and there's no way that they're going to be able to give 87% net to the investor client unless they start red penning some of this stuff, right? Get rid of closing costs, raise the price, whatever it is. So that's a whole fun other discussion, which I just did a video on, which you guys will be able to see soon if you're a premium member. But all that to say, just know that sometimes the closing cost is just a casualty. It's one of the easiest and biggest things they can red pen. It doesn't always mean that they're not going to pay it. Moving quickly, I want to go to the next slide. We're on the same subject here. When the servicer or investor won't allow a buyer's closing cost credit, how to improve your odds, right? The single one thing a buyer of a short sale who needs a closing cost credit can do is to pay a reasonable sales price. Now, this seems a little elementary, but you know, it never ceases to amaze me when I have conversations, even with agents who have closed 10, 20, 30 short sales, and I still get this glossed over look in my face like you did not just ask me that. Obviously, if you're paying below, if you're offering some lowball, goofy price, getting buyer's closing cost credit is going to be very rare. This means you probably can't make a lowball offer. In fact, you might have to add the amount of your closing costs on top of the sales price to entice the bank to accept it in some rare cases. Obviously, that's subject to the appraisal working. This can be a tricky situation because you don't want to pay too much for the home. If you bump up the sales price too far, then it probably won't appraise for your lender. If your lender won't appraise it, you won't get the loan if the short sale bank won't back down. It can become a catch-22 situation. So the idea is just know, lowball offers, this is just practical wisdom. It's going to lower or decrease your chances of getting closing cost credits paid by the bank for your buyer, number one. Number two, know that every now and then in certain circumstances, if you feel like the appraisal can handle it, you build those closing costs into your price. Even stack it is the term we use. If you're fully disclosing that to your client, they want the house bad enough, and you have that listing agent make that argument very, very clearly to the negotiator that this is what you're doing. So to please, shift your focus. This is not us trying to take advantage. This is us in good faith saying we're willing to do what it takes to get these closing costs. Which, by the way, is something that is very rare in that world. They don't ever hear that. Everything's always combative and adversarial. So when you kind of just roll up your sleeves and say, hey, well, let's work together, we're even willing to stack it. That's how they need these costs. That's an important thing. So how do you improve your odds? We're continuing that conversation. Let the negotiator know up front that the closing costs are mandatory and the buyer cannot close without them. Don't just put them on the HUD and cross your fingers. This is so huge right now. There's so many people that, in my experience, they just put the closing cost credit for the buyer on the HUD, and they just sit and wait and see what happens. They don't want to rock the boat. They're afraid if they talk about it, maybe that's going to create, a little bit of a red flag. That's all wrong. The truth is, you got to have the conversation up front. You got to let the negotiator know, hey, we asked for cost. This is not just a bartering chip. This is something that I need to share with you. The buyers have shared with me in extensive interviews with the selling agent that they need this. Their funds are tight. They're fully qualified, great candidates to buy this home, but these costs are mandatory. So we got to work together as a team to make sure we get them these costs. And if you have a major policy challenge with that, let's deal with that right now, and before we waste both of our time. Let them know up front. So important, so important. Those of you who are premium members, if you're going to use this training and talk to your office about it, this is the point you want to harp on. This should just be tattooed on our chest, right? I mean, you don't wait till later. Don't sweep it under the rug. Deal with it head on with your negotiator. They'll respect it, and it's going to help you really identify what the challenges will be right up front. And next bullet point, if the buyer intends to utilize conventional financing, get the buyer approved. Hey, I'm going to give you a disclaimer here. This is a little tricky, but I've talked to my attorneys about it. I've talked to different counsel. We're not saying to lie. We're not saying to be deceptive. I'm just saying get smart. And so know that the priority here is to get smart. The buyer intended to utilize conventional financing. Get the buyer approved also via FHA financing, and ask for the closing costs with the FHA box check. That's how it is in California, or stating that it's FHA financing right there on the first page of the residential purchase agreement. So in other words, if they're a conventional buyer, get them pre-approved as FHA as well, and ask for the closing costs via FHA. Jacob, that's a lot of work. That's extra time. I just want to send the offer to the bank and throw it against the wall and see what sticks. And people say, Jacob, how do you close a higher percentage? How does this work? It's working hard. Every transaction takes a lot of care, to the details. And so you're going to check the FHA box, and then once the servicer investor agrees to the buyer's closing cost credit, the buyer can then decide if he or she wants to go FHA or conventional. I've never seen an approval letter in my experience where they say, we'll approve the buyer's closing cost credit subject to the buyer obtaining FHA financing. It's usually just a box that's checked. We'll allow it because it's FHA, and then it's up to the buyer. The buyer has every right to change to conventional. It's an addendum. The whole world knows about it. It's fully transparent. They're shifting their financing terms, but you've already got the bank where you want them. They already have agreed to it in theory and in terms of their net, and so now you're just switching the financing. And this is something that is, again, it's a shortcut. There's no shortcuts. It's an extra step that will help you close more transactions. And I'm seeing banks become more and more tight and rigid on their closing cost credit policy, and this is one way to really help increase your odds, if you will. And this is something important to do. And again, I can't stress enough that there really is no shortcut to this kind of thing. So that's that. So let's look at our third point. And I hope these are helping you. We're moving fast on purpose because I'm sure there's going to be a couple questions at the end. And we could give so many anecdotes and what ifs and scenarios, and I don't think that's to the advantage of our large audience today. Obviously, we've struck a nerve with this particular training topic because of the viewership that we have here. But my thing is to say, hey, I have some experience. I have surrounded myself with people with some experience. We've closed a lot of short sales, and so here's some of the things that are more practical that we can help you with. This last one's a little bit unique. What do you do when the servicer / investor, because a lot of times they work for each other, would prefer to foreclose rather than short selling? And again, we all hear about this thing that, well, don't banks always prefer to short sell or foreclosure? Foreclosure always costs more money for the bank, and always not true. That's not always the case. Let's look at this. And in some areas where the dollar amounts are lower in your market, this might be helpful to you to understand and not have this kind of this pompous pro short sale attitude that short sale is always the best option, because it really isn't. Although it's always the best option, or most of the time for our client, for us, because we earn a paycheck, but it's not always the best option for the investor. So here's look at some of the rare occurrences. It is rare, but I've seen it happen several times lately, twice in my own experience, just here locally in Southern California. Here are some of the reasons a servicer or an investor might prefer to foreclose. First one, they might receive more at the foreclosure sale or auction. Here's an example. If the first mortgage holder has an unpaid principal balance of $100,000 and the property is valued at $95,000, scratch and dent value, that's their kind of REO value or scratch and dent value. So the unpaid principal balance is $100,000. The value, scratch and dent REO value is $95,000. There's a second mortgage who's going to need to be given money through the short sale. There's delinquent property taxes. I should have put property taxes, not just taxes, but delinquent property taxes. There's an HOA lien that wants their $1,100, and all the other costs of the sale, commission, escrow, title, whatever it is in your state. And they would likely net a higher amount by foreclosing. Many of them have tools in place, these decision tools, to help them with these types of scenarios to make decisions. So it's a $100,000 unpaid principal balance. By the time you pay it second, it's half a commission, HOA lien, all the other challenges. They're only netting $75,000. Whereas if they take it to auction, they might be able to get a buyer at $90,000, $95,000. That's not that hard to understand, but it's funny because we get, and I'm guilty of this, you get moving in a direction so fast, we'll take any listing. I had one in Diamond Bar here in Southern California where it was the exact scenario. And the negotiator, the day we were pushing for a post-on, was one of my Hail Mary listings, and in hindsight I shouldn't have taken, but I did because I kind of like fall for my clients. I meet them, I want to help, and I'm kind of a sucker for a good story and a nice person. And I don't regret it, but it was a lot of time wasted. And at the bottom line is the servicer was a smaller component type servicer working for the investor, preferred to foreclose. And I was like, no, you can't prefer to foreclose. Haven't you been seeing the FHFA and the Treasury? Everyone's trying to encourage borrowers to avoid foreclosure. And it doesn't matter. Truth is, we do. This is capitalistic behavior. We're doing what's best for us, right? And you kind of can't blame them. I had one guy tell me from SunTrust recently, short selling is a privilege, Jacob Swodeck, because I'm sure he Googled me and maybe I was acting arrogant or something. I don't know, but short sale is a privilege, and then it is a privilege. They're not bound to agree to a short sale. They're bound when you're in the servicer capacity to act in the best interest of their client via the pooling and servicing agreement, the loan investor. So that's one scenario. Another scenario is if there's mortgage insurance on a loan, which, by the way, in 99.9% of the time, only foreclosure can trigger the claim, meaning the payout of this insurance policy, and the insurance protection coverage is enough to guarantee them a hefty amount post-foreclosure, it might be easier for them to foreclose and file a claim with the MI carrier, right? And I don't have time to get all the details, but mortgage insurance creates a challenge in this space. If there's a single lien, it doesn't have to be, but just using that as a hypothetical scenario, and there's MI insurance, and their coverage protection is big, and they don't want to deal with it. There's a sale date, and the borrower hasn't reached out to them until the 11th hour. Let's just take it to the sale. We'll file a claim with the mortgage insurance carrier, and we will get more than we would as a short sale. Jacob, how do they know that? These banks, these servicers use very, very expensive, sophisticated software technology called NPV, net present value, decision tools. Wells Fargo has their decision tool, which ties the net present value piece into the MANP, the minimum acceptable net proceeds technology, and it spits out an answer: foreclose. This one's better to foreclose. We got MI. We know that we can get more money that way. Borrower has been on the fence, sitting on their hands way too long. We're not going to have any compassion. We're going to push through foreclosure, and it makes more financial sense for them. Let's look at this next slide here. Some more reasons, or the final reason: history leaves clues. I just had this recently, where I went as high as I could via escalation with some of the connections I've made over the years, and they went through this borrower's file from 2.5 years ago. Their lack of cooperation, their lack of responsiveness, even some of their phone calls, things that the homeowner has said, and now here we are at the last minute throwing a short sale, Hail Mary, and they just weren't going to budge. Look at this. History leaves clues. Some servicers or investors are making a goal line decision to not postpone foreclosure based on the borrower's lack of interest in attempting any foreclosure avoidance remedy before the 11th hour. There seems to be less tolerance and empathy from the servicer investors today than in the past. And I think this is absolutely accurate. You're just seeing, because of the backlog inventory, the shadow, they feel many times, especially Fannie and Freddie, that homeowners are taking advantage of this backlog and using it as a stimulus game plan to save money and live in their home for free, and then throw a short sale Hail Mary at the last minute, and they're not budging anymore. They're going back into their notes, seeing their data entry and saying, nope, this person has not been responsible, has not been responsive, and or nor cooperative, and we're not going to allow it to be postponed. We're not going to agree to a short sale. Probably one of the more depressing of our webinars lately, but look, let's talk about what's out there, right? So you guys can have both hands on the wheel, your eyes on the road, and we can talk about these things. I think the more of these types of trainings and conversations we have, the more equipped you'll be to close more transactions, have more short sale success, and make more money as a priority, plus help more homeowners avoid foreclosure. Just what you learned today, you can walk into more listing appointments, more intelligent, and beat out your competition head and shoulders, because you can talk intelligently about the what-ifs that are lurking in this space. So hopefully you got some value out of it. Jason, I'm going to turn it back over to you, see if there are any specific questions, or questions, I should say, relating specifically to the topics we talked about today. Hopefully there's no questions about particular state law, because I'm not qualified to answer those, or tax issues. But I definitely can talk about these generic scenarios that we talked about, and then maybe, Jason, if you want to explain to them how they can ask questions. I kind of gave them a visual there.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Jacob. Great information. There's a little icon here on the question pane showing you how to, or rather on the slide deck, showing you how to ask a question. So you just go over to the right-hand side of the toolbar, pop that thing open, and then just go ahead and type your question in there, and then I will, of course, pitch those over to Jacob. So Jacob's not currently seeing the questions and the comments, so I see them, and then I will moderate them over to him. And one that I do want to start off with, Jacob, came on, and I'm going to move the slide deck back just a little bit to where it says the second bullet point here, or the final bullet point rather, if there is mortgage insurance on a loan and only foreclosure triggers a claim and the insurance protection coverage is enough to guarantee them a hefty amount post-foreclosure, it may be easier for them to foreclose and file a claim with MI carrier later. The question concerning that is, and I know you covered this in a previous topic, so maybe just revisit it briefly, is how can agents, as they're getting into a short sale transaction or the negotiating phase, how can they verify if there is or is not MI on that particular file?
Great question. Yeah, and so I will start it out by saying there is no silver bullet. There's no surefire way to find out. I've talked recently about the fact that we need to learn to get our negotiators off script because many of them are reading a script. Their job is to not let us know they're reading a script. So instead of asking, is there mortgage insurance on this loan, their answer will more than likely be, I'm not able to detect that at this time. We're going to move forward, or whatever their answer is. My question I'd ask them to get them off script would be, I know there's mortgage insurance here. I need you to confirm that and let me know who the carrier is, and I can wait all day on hold while you or your supervisor find that out for me. You're not giving them an out. There's no script for that. It's basically like, let me put you on hold, see what I can do. And so you already know, you act like you know there's insurance already. You'll hold all, as long as it takes. Go get your supervisor. I need to know. It's very important to the success of this transaction. Also, if it's borrower-paid loan insurance, right, like 80-20 loans where there's borrower-paid loan mortgage insurance, a lot of times that shows up right on their mortgage statement. But yeah, it takes some savvy. You'll just need to know how to find out from the negotiator, customer service, how to press the right buttons to find out if there's MI. It's not advertised. I just read something in DS News about 2 weeks ago that Old Republic Mortgage Insurance and one other, I forget who it was, is starting an outreach campaign trying to encourage their clients, meaning borrowers who have loans that have mortgage insurance held by them as the carrier, to start to be proactive in their approach to avoiding foreclosure. Now that might just be a feel-good PR piece, but if that was true, that's a really big benefit in our industry, because the problem with mortgage insurance most of the time is it's not detectable until it's too late. So it's a long answer for a short question, but basically no guarantees, but push, ask the right questions, get your negotiator off script, and you'll increase your chances of finding out there's MI more times than not.
All right, and Stacy asked, will there be a download for these slides? And there's a couple more questions specific to the content, Jacob, but I just want to take a second to address some of the housekeeping. Stacy, yes, the slides generally are posted the same day, so they should be posted towards the end of today, and they are posted in the members area. And you will have access to download the audio and video portion of this, as well as the slide deck as a standalone, in the event you want to do your own particular inter-office training, if you're a team leader or a team manager or broker or anything along those lines. Stacy also has a follow-up question, Jacob, and this would be for you, and it says, what if the seller is an active BK, and is that always a bad listing to take?
We have one right now where GMAC is the servicer, and there is a Chapter 7 bankruptcy was just filed, and oddly enough, they actually are going to allow us to negotiate the short sale while in BK, which is a first. HAFA has some special allowances to be able to do a short sale negotiation while you're in BK. But the bottom line is 9 times out of 10, once the Chapter 7's filed, the creditor/servicers are included in the creditor list, and it freezes everything. The legal department gets red flag notification at the servicer level, and it's very tough to pursue a short sale. There are some random times where where it's possible, but more times than not, you're going to be on a 90 to 120-day delay until discharge. And if there's any junior liens post Chapter 7, those are traditionally going to be charged off, and now you're going to be dealing with collection versus traditional loss mitigation. So the answer is yes, you can take one. Are they harder? Absolutely. Is it more difficult? Yes. Does it make sense more times than not for the attorney to wait till after a short sale to file BK? Yes. Will you win that argument every time with an attorney? No. So I have two situations right now that are exactly like that, and they're very frustrating. So yes, it's much more difficult. It's too difficult to make a blanket statement that you shouldn't take those listings, but in terms of increasing the difficulty, it absolutely does do that.
Okay, two more questions, and then we'll go ahead and button this up. Stacy says thank you, by the way, with a big smile. And so again, two more questions, and we'll go ahead and button this up. Larry asked, where should we look to improve our negotiating skills? And I think that's a very good question, always constantly sharpening the sword and improving, especially in this fluid and evolving landscape. I will tell you, Larry, that Jacob did a presentation about 2 weeks about getting your negotiator off script, and because they are on a script, and asking the right questions sort of along the lines of the mortgage insurance question he covered earlier. But in the members area that you have access to there, assuming you're a premium member, there are plenty of training webinars and videos on how to work with negotiators, the right questions to ask. There are scripts, there's tips, there's strategies, everything that you would need. Jacob, did you want to go ahead and add anything to that in regard to, sharpening the sword or becoming a better negotiator?
Yeah, there are good books out there that I've never read, and there's good classes out there that I've never taken. Since I was a kid, my mom used to say, you should be an attorney. You're always pleading your case. You're always trying to get out of stuff and selling everybody. And I think that there are a lot of people out there like that. When I first started doing short sales in the 90s, there was no such thing as a loss mitigation department. And it was really about achieving a goal. And when you understand what the goal is that you're trying to achieve, which is debt settlement, them taking a loss in order for the greater good of most parties involved, you learn to keep your eye on the goal, and everything else is just you're plowing through that. So when you talk to a collector, negotiating is knowing I could be abrasive and a jerk, but am I going to get where I want? No. So let me learn how to be a chameleon. Let me learn how to build rapport, build relationship. And so I think I could answer this in a long way. I'll shorten it by saying the greats, those who really do well in the space, they have a knack for understanding people, reading signs, picking up on verbal type body language, and knowing that the end is in sight. I use the example, if X plus Y is 40, what's X plus Y? And people say 10 plus 30, or whatever it is. 1 plus 39. How did you know that? Are you a math genius? No, you knew that X plus Y is 40. So then how many different variations of X plus Y equals 40? And anybody can come up with that. And the reason is because you knew the answer. You knew where you were headed. And negotiations really will improve as you get a more broad, a more specific overall understanding of the short sale process, all the moving parts, and then you're able to achieve that goal more commonly because you know that you have to navigate through in the relationship and move here, rob Peter, pay Paul, turn this around, build relationship, escalate to a negotiator, to a supervisor, and you have all these moving parts. And it really comes down to experience, understanding where you're going, and I think arguably having a little bit of mojo, having that skill and ability to sell, persuade, and negotiate, that doesn't hurt either.
All right, final question, and this one may be a bit of a curveball, so you may want to move up in the batter's box just a little bit. It is so fresh and relevant. If maybe if you don't have the answer to it because it is as of yesterday, we can do a follow-up piece and post it into the members area form, but I'm just going to go ahead and throw it out there. The question comes from Julie, and Julie asks, Chase just told me yesterday on a half a short sale with Fannie Mae, so a half a short sale with Fannie Mae, as the investor, that they are not allowing any buyer closing costs on an FHA loan, and that's their policy. Have you heard of any changes with Fannie Mae / HAFA?
So my response to Julie is that if somebody makes a bold comment like that, I would absolutely ask for it in writing, and I would escalate to HMP, escalations with an S at hmpadmin.com. H as in Harry, M as in Mary, P as in Paul, escalations at hmpadmin.com, and ask for that policy in writing. For Fannie or Chase to make any kind of internal policies to never pay closing costs on FHA just sounds like a huge stretch to me. I think it's very much moving backwards or in the wrong direction. I would ask for proof of that policy and CC the escalations at hmpadmin.com. And if you want to get really fancy, you can also CC on there Lori Maggiano, who's one of the directors of the Treasury. If you send me an email or find me on Facebook, I'll give you Lori's email. That's not to be used lightly, but that's in these half-of situations where you really kind of have to go toe-to-toe with them. They see Lori's name, and they'll double-check and make sure that they have all their ducks in a row. Matter of fact, here's the best way to do it. If you're a premium certified member, go to the Ask the Expert forum and just create a question for Jacob in the Ask the Expert. What's Lori Maggiano's email? And I'll go ahead and give it to you on there, and any other premium members can have it as well. But yeah, I've never heard of that. A matter of fact, I've had Fannie pay FHA closing costs. If there's a new rule, which believe me, stuff gets by me all the time, that's very bad news, and I appreciate you sharing it, but I would almost think that it's the negotiators' poor interpretation of what they heard, playing the telephone game, or just a way to try to push back to increase the net to the investor.
All right, terrific. Well, we are coming up on an hour, so we will certainly button this up, but I want to encourage everybody to look into the members area training calendar. This is one of several phenomenal webinars that we have on the books for the next upcoming weeks. And you can certainly pre-register for them in advance, and then the system will automatically send you a reminder of the upcoming webinar. So you want to log into the training calendar, get yourself pre-registered, and then get the reminders, and make this a regular part of keeping your skills sharp and, again, sharpening that sword of negotiations and short sale skills. So we want to thank everybody for being on the call with us today. Hope that you received some tremendous value. Jacob, I want to thank you for your time, as I know it's extremely valuable. I want to thank the agents on the line for joining us today. And as always, if you have any questions or if you missed any portion or you just want to inquire about Partner First, please feel free to call us directly at our office here. And aside from that, wishing everybody a great day and a prosperous 2012. So on behalf of Jacob Swodeck and Partner First, this is Jason signing off. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.